Today is December the 2nd, 2010, and we are interviewing Jesus. Could you spell your first and last name for me?
Sure. My first name is Jesus. It's Jesus. My last name is Estrada-Perez. Estrada-Perez.
Great. And then we just kind of want to start with some basic questions, such as like, what your family life was and like how you were born and raised.
Okay. Well, I was born in Mexico. I was born in Nayarit, in a small town, Tecuala. And I moved to the U.S. when I was 4. I first moved to California in the north, and then we moved to a suburb of Minneapolis, Bloomington, when I was 9.
And then, what was your education? Did you have difficulties in your classes because English was not your first language? Or?
English, yeah, no, when I first started kindergarten, I didn't know any English. My whole life up to then basically had been in Mexico, and so I didn't know any English, and my family didn't speak a lot of English at the time either. So when I first started, I was a monolingual, a Spanish speaker, but I didn't, at first I didn't, I think that the school where I went, they had a lot of experience with monolingual Spanish speakers, and so they had a really good system of catching us up on our English. And no, I learned to read pretty fast, and I caught up pretty fast in terms of English. But I was in ESL classes until I think I was in 5th grade, but then I was moved out of ESL. I guess where the challenges were in terms of my family and my education were going home. My mom couldn't help me with my homework because she had gone to 3rd grade, I think, and so there wasn't some sort of culture of doing homework or even helping with homework when I was home, because not everyone was working, and then not anyone can really help me with mine. And so I think that's where the challenge was, not necessarily in terms of language skills, but that kind of culture of helping with homework.
Just the getting into the routine of it.
Yeah, getting into the routine, since my mom, didn't know what was really going on at school, and also because she hadn't experienced that. She didn't know even to ask if I had homework and how my homework was going, because she didn't know that was going on, and that those are the questions that you need to be asked. So, yeah. Did you mostly just want to know about earlier stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have other questions too about like, for your Chicano studies, did you major or minor in it?
I minored in Chicano studies. I wanted to major, but I had already been here. So I had been here for about 3 years, and then decided that I was going to be a speech pathologist, because I thought I wanted to just make money. And then I decided that I wanted to do humanities, and so I majored in cultural studies and comparative literature, and then I also decided that I wanted to major in Chicano studies. But when I decided that, I decided that at the end of my fall semester of my junior year.
Yeah.
Or wait, no, senior year. So I had a semester left, and I took 3 Chicano studies classes that spring semester. And then I was ready to take a full 5th year, but then when I got my financial aid distribution, I realized that I wasn't going to get much, and so I decided that I just needed to get out of here in a semester, and took just enough classes to get the minor, and get my major out of the way and graduate. But I had intended and wanted to major, but I didn't have time.
Yeah. What made you interested in Chicano studies?
Well, it's actually I owe my introduction to Chicano studies to my friend Silvia Gonzalez Castro, who also was involved with the Chicano studies department. I met her at La Raza Student Cultural Center, and she was like, "You have to take this class Chicano Gender and Sexuality, and it's a 4,000 level class, and I think I was a sophomore, and I was like, I don't think I'm ready for that, and she said, no, just take it, it'll be great, and I did, and I really, really liked it, but I was still on this mindset that I needed, that college for me was a way to like find a secure future, and Chicano Studies was really interesting, but it didn't really seem like something that would get me a job, and so I was like, I don't know, and so, but then I kind of decided that after my sophomore year, I decided that I wanted, well, no, I should say after my, like halfway through my junior year, I decided that I wanted to be in school, not to necessarily get a job, but even though that was important, but to really learn, right? Because all these things that I had learned in this Chicano Studies class and the one or two that I took after that, changed the way that I thought about myself and my community and my position within society, and that was really important to me because I had never come across that, right? I think in the second classes that I took was with it was Chicana Indígena Studies, and that class, I remember calling my sister after the first day and being like, Nena, you wouldn't believe what I just learned, right? Do you even know what Aslan is? I mean, and I had heard the word a lot, because I used to wear those like shirts, right? When I was like in middle school, and I thought I was like this like Mexican, whatever. Anyway, but I had heard about that word, but I had no idea what it was, and so Tlatoki like spelled it out on the first day and gave us the history of Aslan and what it meant, and I was like, what? I'd never heard of Aslan being this, possibly being, in the Southwest, and what that meant for me as a Mexican person in the U.S. This position where I felt like such an outsider, but at the same time I had history here for such a long time. That's something that shocked me, and I told my sister this, and she was like, "Yeah, I hadn't heard about that either." And I mean, I don't know. We're both Mexican, and I don't know, and I was like, what, I was like, if this is what I'm going to learn in these classes, I think I want to do this. And then when I decided that I wanted to go to grad school, I decided that to possibly be a professor, I decided that I wanted to study my people, quote unquote, because, if I'm going to be writing about people, and if I'm going to be like learning about people, I want to learn about me in the process. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I forgot about the question halfway, like while I was talking, I was like, I don't really remember what our question was, but
that's okay. What years were you at the U?
I started fall 2004 and I graduated fall 2008, so I was here for 4.5 years.
So do you just work here, or do you work anywhere else?
It's funny to think that I work here because I'm a grad student and I technically work for the U, but I don't really ever think of myself as like a worker for the U. But yeah, I just work here.
So you kind of went over this a little bit before, but what does Chicano Studies mean to you? Like if someone asked you down the street, or someone asked you to define it, how would you explain it to them?
Chicano Studies, that's really interesting. Well, I think in a simple way, I would explain to someone that Chicano Studies is a field of knowledge, right, where we try to understand people of Mexican descent in the U.S., and their politics and their culture. And I'm sorry, what was the first question that you asked me?
Just what it means to you.
Okay, and so what it means to me is a way of understanding the way that I fit in the world, right? Because I had never gotten that throughout my education. high school, in elementary school, in and in and even in undergrad for half of it, I never understood what it meant to be a person of color in the U.S. because I had never seen myself in history or in literature. I remember specifically at one point in, I think, 11th or 10th grade when we were studying, we were taking American history, and we briefly mentioned the Mexican-American War, and I think that, and then the Zimmerman telegram. And I remember this political cartoon, which is always shown when we talk about the Zimmerman telegram, and it's this German army man like whispering into the ear of a Mexican man, and he's like, of course, wearing like a sarape and a sombrero. And it's funny that those are the only two representations that I have of me and of my people before coming to Chicano studies. And I think that and then I think of Chicano studies, and I think of, all I can think about is Mexican people, brown people, because those are the people who are writing about us and for us, and so it's a way of understanding me and the people that I think I belong to, and the communities that I think I belong to, that has been missing throughout my entire life. So I feel like I'm playing catch up every time that I read a new Chicano studies book. I feel like it's making up for something that I missed for the first 18 or 20 years of my life, because and it's also it's important. It's nice to be able to even bridge the gap, right, between Chicano studies. I think as a discipline is really important because it allows you to work within your communities, because you're not trying to isolate yourself in terms of who you are and who you're studying. Like I can talk about what I'm studying and what I'm researching to my family, and that's not something that I could have ever done studying speech pathology or even linguistics. Because my family, they'll get some of the cultural references, and they'll get some of the theoretical implications of Chicano studies, and that's really important to me because when you go to college, I think for a lot of Chicanos and Latinos, it's in so many ways a way of distancing yourself from your family because of the education gap, and learning to kind of speak this academic kind of language that we are even physically separated from our families, right? That it's good to find a way to reconnect with our families and our communities, and I think that Chicano studies really lets you do that.
So could you say that in a way it kind of created your individual identity as well?
Yeah, it had a lot of. I'd never heard of the word Chicano until I came to the U, and I was finally started going to the Raza Student Cultural Center and thinking about taking a Chicano Studies class. But before I took a Chicano Studies class, I had no idea what that meant. And it's funny because I was at a conference, National Association for Chicana and Chicano Studies, and I was talking to this woman from LA, and she was like, and I told her the story that I'd never heard of Chicano until I came to college, and I was like 20. She's like, that's incredible, because she's like, I grew up my entire life knowing that I was Chicano and what that meant. And I was like, I don't know, I just, I knew my entire life that I was Mexican, but I also knew that I wasn't the Mexican type. When I went home to Mexico, I knew I wasn't the same as my cousins, and I also knew that I obviously was American in some ways, but not American in a lot of ways, right? And so that ambivalent space, which we talk a lot about as mestizaje, or borderlands, like I had always experienced that, and it wasn't until I read Gloria Anzaldua's book, and she spelled it out for me, that I was like, wow, this is what I am, right? This is what I've been experiencing. Someone finally gave me a name for this experience that I've had this entire time. And that was a really important moment for me because, yeah, it helped me understand who I was as this person who didn't fit in any of these spaces. So, yeah, I think so.
When you think back about, like, your college time while you were studying Chicano studies, how did the focus of Chicano studies impact, like, what you saw, not just about yourself, but like the world in general?
Well, I mean, I think I spoke about it before a little bit, where you know, it made me realize that a lot was missing in the world, right? I mean, when I think about my nieces who are going through elementary school and what they're not learning about themselves, right, is it's kind of scary, because they're being written out, and they're kind of learning to accept that passively through what they're not learning, right? They don't know that they're not learning about their people because they're not, or I hate that their people word. They're not learning about themselves and their communities, and they're being given a specific representation of America and of themselves as Americans that is giving them some sort of complex, right, that they're not really fitting in, which I think is really, really problematic. And so I think it's important that way. And also, even when students that I have they're not my students, but students in my classes, they'll, you know, whenever they come and see me, they always tell me, like, I had no idea, right? I had no idea that Mexican people have been here this long. I had no idea that not all Mexican people are immigrants. I had no idea that even parts of Utah or Idaho were parts of Mexico. And that's, I think, really important, because Chicano studies is therefore giving us a new way of thinking about not only Chicanos, but America as a whole. And that's really important for me, because I study American studies, which is, the study of America. And that's important to reconceptualize the way we think about it, because it's really hard even now. If you think about SB 1070, we think of, we can go back in history, and Chicano history, which has documented the way that Chicanos and people of color, and especially Latinos, have been reprimanded, keep falling in these same sort of patterns that keep showing up, right? I mean, if you go back to the 1950s and the Operation Wetback, don't quote me on that. We have Latinos in the 1950s being sent back, right, to Mexico with or without acknowledgement of their citizenship status, and we're seeing that again, because SB 1070, is going to discriminate against people of color, because people of brown does not equal you American, and therefore brown equals illegal, right? And so even though we may not be deported, we will still always be suspect of that deportation. We'll always be suspected as foreigners if we don't reconceptualize the way that we imagine America. And and I think Chicano studies it plays a key role in reconceptualizing the way we do that.
Do you think that since the schools and elementary schools aren't focusing on that and identity and knowing about your culture, do you feel that now that it's been, not all families, but some families that have been here for a while, that maybe their parents have gone to college, that responsibility or that knowledge should be taught at their house or homes?
I think that the responsibility shouldn't necessarily lie on the parents, just because
maybe not so much the parents, but family members in general.
Right. I think that we can gain a lot of important knowledge from our families, and I think it's important to pass on what you know, right? But I think that that because we allow the government to take over our education as people and socialize us as Americans, I never speak this way, so it's really interesting. To socialize us into I guess citizens, right? In the loose term, I think a lot of the responsibility lies on the U.S. But unfortunately, change doesn't come naturally, and therefore we need to people who think it's important need to push for that change, but also we need to recognize that people don't want that change because there's a lot of power and a lot of investment in keeping the ways that we imagine our society as white and European. There's a lot of power behind that, and there's a lot of people invested in that notion. So there's a lot of resistance, and I don't think it's up to, and I don't think that resistance can be fully countered by what our parents have to teach us. I think it's important, but I think that the home makes such a small part of your life. Well, not such a small part, but it's a part, right? It's not the whole. You can't control someone else's entire conceptualization of themselves through the home, because school, think about it, we spend like 8 hours a day growing up there. That's a lot of time, right? And peer pressure is so much more in a way functional than that familial pressure. So
you talked a little bit about this earlier, but could you maybe describe it a little bit more about how much Chicano studies impacted your career and your career choices?
Sure. Well, I am now, so at 24, I am currently a grad student at the University of Minnesota studying Chicano visual culture and Chicano queer studies. If you would have asked me what I would have been doing even when I was 20, this would have definitely not been the answer. And not just because I'm a grad student and I never imagined myself that I would be, and because I'm studying queer studies or because I'm studying American studies, but even Chicano studies. The fact that I didn't know what Chicano was and now I'm studying these now that I'm studying Chicano studies, I mean, that's a huge change, right? And so for something to completely impact my life, to take me where I am now, and I never would have envisioned this, right? I mean, like when you ask I was asked my entire life what I was going to do, I was going to say I was going to be an artist, right? Since I was like 8 or something, I was wanted to be an artist. And now I'm a Chicano studies student. I mean, that's a really, really important role, because it's obviously changed my entire life path. I never thought that I would be studying this, mostly because I didn't know that I could. And so once I learned that I could, my life just went. So the impact has been very, very extraordinary, to the point where I can't imagine what my life would be like right now if I hadn't come across this discipline, because I would probably be inspecting people's ears right now. That's what I would be doing. And that's horrible to all those ideologists out there, but that's not, I'm so happy now, and I'm so interested in what I study that I can't imagine what better of an impact I could have had, right? So I think that the impact has been really, really, really big on my life. So,
do you see it continuing in your life, of like if you stay with the youth or continue teaching, or
yeah, Chicano studies will always be a part of my life. That sounds a little corny, but I mean, I've decided to kind of. Sorry, this is getting a little cheesy. I've decided to dedicate, the next 5 years or 6 years or whatever of my life to studying Chicanos, and I don't think that that's going to go away. Like 5 years is a long time to dedicate to a specific study, and so I think that, I don't know, I can't ever imagine one day not calling myself Chicano, and I can't imagine myself one day not considering myself a part of the Chicano community, or and I look forward to the day when I can call myself a Chicano studies scholar, and I look forward to the day when I will teach in a Chicano studies program. So no, I don't really think that I will have, I mean, I think that, yeah, that Chicano studies will always be a part of my life, because it's part of who I am now, and unless I change completely, I don't think that I'll ever lose that.
Do you ever see like a vision for Latinos in general in the United States?
So like my vision of Latinos in the
Yes.
US? It's kind of hard to put. I mean, I don't know. We're at a really interesting point in history where Latinos were like this really mass growing population, but at the same time, the population stays in certain phases, right? I mean, I think yesterday on the Minnesota Daily there was his article on the new president of the university who wants to increase diversity, and he had, and there on the article there were two diagrams, the pie charts, showing diversity among students, and they were, I think, 4 years apart, and a lot of them changed, but one of the ones that didn't change was Latinos, Chicanos at the U. It was 2% in I think 4 years, and so that's kind of interesting because our numbers seem to be growing, but our numbers in certain places aren't growing, and so that's interesting. I don't really know if I see. I mean, there's obviously going to be some change, but I don't really know what the future is going to hold. I think that people are paying a lot more attention to us as a community. I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, I think it could be both, right? In some instances, it's bad because we can see that in Arizona, but in some instances, it's good, right? I think, at least politically, people are starting to take Latinos serious as a constituent of American society. I mean, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing I said again, but I think at least we're starting to push our way into like the into the consciousness of American politics, American culture, right? Like we have George Lopez, who is this Latino, I think Mexican, but also very dark man, which is great because, I mean, if you think about the way that Latinos have been represented, generally it's the lighter skinned, more Spanish-looking people, and I think that that's important because we're not only pushing for Latinos in the consciousness, but different types of Latinos, right? The Latinos that aren't, the representations that somehow portray us as a certain way, which make us more comfortable for U.S. society. So that's really important. I think, I think that we're making a lot of headway in terms of that. So in terms of culture, in terms of politics, and then even, the rise of Spanish use in the U.S. I think is changing and increasing. So I think that at least so I guess the future would be that for Latinos we're at least making headway into the consciousness of America, right? We can't necessarily be ignored anymore. Well, we can, but we can't, not completely, right? They at least have to deal with us. If they have to ignore us, they're going to have to do it forcefully. I think it's going to be harder and harder for them to write us out of the history books, which is good, because that means if we're present, we can't just show up one day. That means they'll have to explain how we got there, which would be great, because then we wouldn't just be this immigrant group, hopefully. But who knows? So,
is there a hope that you have that for the future that you see now that you would like to change or would like that situation to better?
I think a good question. Specific, are you speaking about specific situation?
It could be in general or specific.
I think, I mean, I'm sure there is, but I can't really come up with one on the top of my head. I think that,
If you can't think of one, that's okay.
I think that, I'm just hoping it'll come out right, like I think that, and then it'll just come out, and I'll just have to chase it. I mean, there are plenty of things. I think that in terms of a community, I think that we need to, in terms of Latinos and Chicanos and Mexicanos, like we need to learn, I think we need to start making bridges more than making borders within our own community, right? I think that because we're starting to get so heterogeneous, right? Like people are, there are more people going to college. There are people making headway into different socioeconomic classes. There are. We've always been different, but I think that we're becoming more and more different. And I think that it's important that when these differences, now that these differences are starting to arise, I want to be careful with that. Now, I think it's important that when we have differences, that we learn to still be united, because I think that sometimes it's really easy to disavow a difference and see it as a threat. But I think that it would be more beneficial for us to accept one another in these differences rather than want to separate ourselves, because I think that would be it wouldn't be helpful to us as a community, right? Because, I mean, we're going to start separating ourselves, and so I think that unity.
How, you did talk about this a lot, but just to more define it, but how important is University of Minnesota for you?
Well, I feel like I'm Mr. Rogers with stories or something, but I have another story. So when I was in high school, I kind of knew that I was coming to college, but I never knew where I was going to go, and no one in my family had been to college before, and so I can ask them for help. And so when I got down to it, I was like, well, I have to apply somewhere, and this was the only place I had heard of, other than Normandale Community College, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just thought, for me, for some reason, I just thought that I had to come to like a college, right, and this with an emblem and like mascot, because that's what college looked like to me, because that's all I knew. I mean, I hadn't even heard of Augsburg, which is across the river, or St. Thomas or Hamlin. Like, I hadn't heard about any of these colleges, and so, this is the only place I applied, and so if it weren't here, I wouldn't be here, right? Not only because I wouldn't be here because this physical place wouldn't exist, but because I wouldn't have been here. And I think it's important, and if I had gone to some of these other colleges, they wouldn't have had this department, right? Like the Chicano Studies department here is very rare. I want to say that it's the only one in the Midwest, and I think I'm right. I think there are like a Latino Studies programs and maybe departments, but I think in terms of Chicano Studies, I think it's the only one, I think, for miles. And so I think that not only is it important for me for it to be here, but also because of what's held inside here, right? This was the first place that I had met other people that could even say Mexico and not Mexico, right? When speaking about Mexico, so that also changed my view. So I think it's been very, very important in shaping who I am. Although I definitely have my qualms with the university, but
That's about it. All the questions we have.
All right.